I still remember the smell of the rain that morning. Sharp and metallic, the kind that seeps into your bones before you even step outside. Washington, D.C. looked older that day, like the city itself had tired of holding on to secrets. The streets shimmered with leftover drizzle, reflecting the brick row houses like twin ghosts. I was 25 then, a secretary at a small law firm on K Street, trying to survive on caffeine, faith, and the idea that one day I'd make my father proud. But my father was already gone. He'd passed away 3 months earlier, in the chill of early spring, leaving behind a silence so heavy it filled every corner of my apartment. My father had always been a man of few words. People called him distant, cold even. He worked for the government. That's all anyone ever knew. Whenever I asked him what exactly he did, he'd smile faintly and say, "I fix things, sweetheart." Then he'd change the subject. As a child, I used to believe that meant he fixed broken machines, or maybe helped people with their taxes. But as I grew older, I realized there was something heavier in his tone. Something guarded. I used to resent that silence. I used to think he didn't trust me. I used to think he didn't love me enough to share his world. The day I found the letter was a Sunday. I was cleaning out his house in Georgetown, sorting through decades of life packed into cardboard boxes. My mother had died years before, and he'd never remarried. Every object felt like it hummed with him. The old wristwatch that never ticked, his cracked leather armchair, the faint scent of pipe tobacco that clung to his bookshelves. The air was thick with ghosts. I was dusting the shelves when I found a small wooden box wedged behind a row of political biographies. The box was locked, the kind with an antique latch, tarnished from years of disuse. I remember running my thumb over the lock, feeling the cool metal bite against my skin. My father was a meticulous man. Nothing he owned was ever left unsecured unless it meant something. After rummaging through his desk drawers, I found a small brass key tucked inside a folder labeled Home Repairs. My heart pounded. Part fear, part curiosity. When I unlocked the box, I found 2 things inside: a faded photograph of my parents on their wedding day, and a thick envelope addressed to me in my father's handwriting. For my daughter, when she is ready. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sat there on the floor, my fingers trembling as I held the letter. The house was utterly silent, except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock, the one that had survived every move, every year. I opened the envelope slowly, careful not to tear the brittle paper. Inside were several pages, written in his neat, slanted handwriting. The same hand that had signed my report cards and grocery lists and birthday cards that always said too little, but meant too much. He began the letter with words that unsettled me instantly. If you're reading this, then it means I didn't get the chance to tell you everything I wanted to while I was alive. There's something you deserve to know. Something I've carried all my life. My throat tightened. I read on. You've always known I worked for the government. What you didn't know is that my job wasn't in accounting or administration. I was part of an intelligence division that operated under the Department of Defense during the Cold War. My duty was to protect information, to prevent threats before they reached our soil. I did things I can't explain fully, not because I don't want to, but because some truths are best buried with their consequences. But there's one truth you must hear. Everything I did, every lie I told, every night I stayed away from home, was to keep you safe. I remember the air in that room turning heavy. The rain outside had stopped, but the silence that followed felt louder than thunder. I kept reading, my eyes devouring every word. There was a time, in 1985, when I was assigned to investigate a man named Victor Lang. He was a defense contractor, working with confidential materials. We suspected he was selling secrets overseas. I was supposed to monitor him, report his moves. But things went wrong. One night, while I was tailing him, he discovered I was watching. A struggle followed. And when it was over, Lang was dead. It was ruled an accident by the Bureau, but it haunted me. Because that night, you were waiting at home for me to come back and read you a bedtime story. I remember your voice on the answering machine. You said, "Daddy, don't be late tonight." I wasn't just late. I was changed. I stopped reading then. My vision blurred. I'd never known that name. I'd never known that my father carried such a burden. The letter trembled in my hands. After that night, I withdrew from you. Not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid. Afraid that the violence I'd witnessed would stain everything I touched. I kept my distance, thinking I was protecting you from who I'd become. I was wrong to think silence could substitute love. But every moment I stayed away, I was watching, from the background, making sure no one ever came near you because of what I'd done. By then, tears had already found my cheeks. The pages smelled faintly of cedar and dust, the kind of scent that lives in attics and memories. I read the next lines like someone afraid to reach the end. When your mother died, I thought I'd failed her too. The work consumed me. But when you graduated college, I sat in the back of the crowd, proud beyond words. I didn't come up to you because I didn't deserve to be part of that moment. I thought keeping my distance was a form of redemption. I realize now it only built a wall between us. Something in me broke then. A quiet, painful understanding. I'd spent years thinking my father didn't care, that he'd chosen duty over love. But sitting there with that letter, I felt the weight of every sacrifice he'd buried beneath his stoicism. I read further, my heart pounding faster. There's one more thing, sweetheart. In my study, there's a safe behind the bookshelf. The same one you used to hide behind when you were little. The code is your birth date. Inside, you'll find a small envelope. It holds something I've kept hidden all these years. Not money, not documents, but proof of what I gave up for you. My hands shook as I pushed the bookshelf away from the wall. Behind it was a safe exactly where he said. I punched in the numbers, month, day, year, and heard the lock click. Inside was a small envelope, yellowed with age, and a photograph. The photo showed a little girl in a park, me, sitting on a bench with a man in a gray suit. His arm was around me, his face partly turned away, but in the background, half hidden by a lamppost, was another man. He wore dark glasses and had a camera pointed straight at us. I turned the photo over. On the back, in my father's handwriting. He never stopped watching, until I made him stop. My blood ran cold. I unfolded the paper inside the envelope. It was a report, dated July 1987, stamped classified. The report detailed an internal security breach involving the same Victor Lang. It mentioned a second operative, unnamed, who had been leaking information to foreign agents. The report ended with a single line that made my pulse race. Case closed due to the death of secondary suspect. It didn't make sense. My father had told me Lang died accidentally, but this hinted at something else. A cover-up, maybe. Or a secret buried under layers of bureaucracy. The rain had started again outside, drumming softly against the windows. I sat on the floor of his study, staring at that photo, that report, that letter. My father's words looped in my head. I made him stop. What did that mean? Did my father kill someone to protect me? I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. There were still more pages. If you found the photo, then you know. I never meant for you to inherit my sins, but I also couldn't let them reach you. The man in the background was not a stranger. He worked for Lang. After Lang's death, he started following us. You and your mother. I reported it, but the Bureau told me to stand down, so I handled it myself. It was the only way to end it. They buried the truth, but it stayed with me. Every night, every morning, every time I saw you smile, and knew you'd never have to know what darkness surrounded you. Until now. I pressed the letter to my chest. The house creaked, the air heavy with a silence that felt almost alive. I could hear my heartbeat, loud, fast, uneven. You were the reason I did everything. You were my one good thing. I never stopped loving you, even when I disappeared inside myself. If you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, don't do it out of pity. Do it because you understand that love sometimes hides behind silence." The letter ended there. No signature, just his initials. R.T.O. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe hours. The city outside had gone dark, the streetlights glowing through the window blinds. The rain had stopped again, leaving a quiet that was almost sacred. I looked at his photograph one last time, then at the empty chair by the fireplace, where he used to sit. That night, I dreamed of him, standing on a train platform, his hands in his pockets, the same faint smile he always wore. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, as if to say, "Now you know." The next morning I woke with swollen eyes and a strange peace I hadn't felt in years. The anger I'd carried toward him, for his distance, his secrets, his coldness, melted into something softer. Maybe understanding doesn't erase the pain, but it gives it shape, a reason. And yet, one question still haunted me. How much of what he wrote was true? And how much was a story meant to protect me even after death? That question led me somewhere I never expected. To a stranger who claimed to have known my father in ways I couldn't have imagined. A week passed before I could bring myself to return to that house. I'd locked everything up after finding the letter, unable to face the shadows that lingered there. But some things have a pull stronger than fear. The kind of pull that won't let you rest until you've seen the truth through to the end. So that Sunday, I went back, the letter folded neatly in my coat pocket, my hands trembling with the weight of it. The morning was gray and still. The city was quiet. The kind of silence that only happens before dawn when the world hasn't decided whether to wake or not. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled like paper and pipe smoke again, as if the house remembered me. Everything looked exactly the same, and yet it felt different. The letter had changed the way I saw everything. Every photograph, every shadow on the wall. I was making coffee in the kitchen when the phone rang. It startled me. The landline hadn't rung in months. I picked it up hesitantly. "Miss Turner?" The voice on the other end was deep, measured, and unfamiliar. "Yes, my name's Thomas Reeve. I used to work with your father." The words froze me in place. My grip tightened on the receiver. "I'm sorry to call like this," he continued. "I got your number from one of your father's old files. He told me, if something ever happened to him, I should reach out to you." I didn't speak at first. My heart was beating too loudly. "You worked with him in the Defense Department?" I asked, a pause. "Something like that. Listen, I think we should meet. There are things you deserve to know. Things he couldn't put in writing." Every instinct told me not to trust a stranger, but something in his voice, calm, almost regretful, made me listen. "Where?" I asked. "Lincoln Memorial. Tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. Sit by the steps. I'll find you." And then he hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I read my father's letter again and again, trying to find hidden meanings between the lines. Who was this man? What could he possibly tell me that my father hadn't already confessed? Part of me feared this was a cruel trick, some remnant of whatever secret world my father had lived in. But another part, the part that still felt the warmth of his words, wanted answers. The next morning, the city felt like it was holding its breath. Fog rolled low over the Potomac, the air sharp with the smell of whetstone. I reached the Lincoln Memorial before 8 and sat on the steps, clutching my coat tighter around me. Joggers passed, tourists murmured, but my eyes scanned every face. Then I saw him, a tall man in a gray coat, silver hair cropped short, a cane in his right hand. He walked with the quiet authority of someone who'd once given orders that changed lives. When his eyes met mine, I knew instantly he wasn't lying about knowing my father. There was recognition there, not just of me, but of who I came from. "Miss Turner," he said softly, removing his hat. "You look just like him when he was your age." I didn't know how to respond. I gestured for him to sit. He lowered himself carefully beside me, his cane resting against the marble step. "I got your call," I said finally. "You said there were things I needed to know." He nodded slowly. "Yes. Your father and I served together, not in the military, but in something adjacent to it. We were part of a small operations unit during the late 80s, focused on internal security. It wasn't glamorous, and most of it was buried in bureaucracy, but your father, he was one of the best. Honest, loyal, too loyal maybe." My throat tightened. "He mentioned someone named Victor Lang." Reeves' jaw clenched. "Lang was dangerous, smart, charming, and reckless. We suspected he was selling defense contracts to foreign bidders. Your father got close to him, tried to build a case, but Lang had connections, high ones. When your father tried to expose him, the Bureau shut it down." I frowned. "Why?" "Because Lang wasn't just selling secrets. He was trading leverage, blackmailing people in the government, people who couldn't afford to be exposed. They wanted the case gone. Your father wouldn't let it go." He looked out toward the reflecting pool, his eyes distant. "That night in '85, the one he mentioned, Lang wasn't supposed to die. It was supposed to be an exchange. But your father realized Lang had set a trap. Someone tipped Lang off that he was being followed. A struggle broke out. Lang pulled a gun. Your father acted first." I swallowed hard. "He said it was an accident." Reeves shook his head. "It wasn't. It was survival. He turned himself in that night. But the higher-ups buried it. They said he was too valuable to lose. And that's when everything changed. They reassigned him, stripped his clearance, and made him a ghost. He took the blame quietly because he thought it would protect you." I felt my chest tighten, the world spinning slower. "Protect me from what?" Reeve hesitated. "After Lang's death, someone started watching him. Watching you. Lang's partner, a man named Ellis Kane. He wanted revenge. He blamed your father for ruining everything. For years, he followed you both. Your father went to the Bureau, begged for protection, but they refused. So he handled it himself." The wind rustled through the trees, scattering the last of the autumn leaves. "Handled it?" I asked. Reeve nodded grimly. "He found Kane before Kane found you. The Bureau cleaned it up, called it a cold case. Unrelated. But your father, he never recovered from it. That was the second death he carried." I stared down at my hands, my fingers shaking. The world around us seemed to fade. The laughter of children, the murmur of tourists. All of it distant. "He killed to protect me," I whispered. Reeves' voice softened. "He sacrificed everything. His career, his reputation, his peace. He thought if he stayed away, you'd never have to know what kind of man he'd become. He used to say, 'Some love is better left unspoken. It keeps the ones we love clean.' Tears blurred my vision. For years I'd hated him for his absence, never realizing he was fighting invisible battles for me." Reeve reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. "He gave this to me years ago. Told me to deliver it when you were ready." Inside was a folded letter and a single-pressed daisy, yellowed with time. I unfolded the note. "Sweetheart, if you're reading this, it means the story has finally reached its end. By now you know the things I did, the choices I made. I don't expect you to understand them, but I hope you'll see the heart behind them. I wanted to give you a clean life, free from the shadows I lived in. Every scar I earned, every lie I told, was to buy you that freedom." The words blurred as tears fell on the page. "When you were little, you once told me you wanted to see the world, that you'd stand on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and shout your name so everyone would hear it. I never told you this, but I stood in the crowd that day when you graduated from Georgetown. I heard your name echo through that hall. I clapped until my hands ached. You never saw me, but I was there. I always was." I pressed the letter to my lips, the scent of old paper and memory mixing with the autumn air. "I've left something for you in my study, beneath the floorboards under the desk. It's yours now. Maybe it will help you understand that love, even when silent, leaves its fingerprints everywhere." That night I returned to the house one last time. The floorboards creaked beneath my steps as if the house itself knew what I was looking for. I pulled open the drawer of his desk and felt underneath. There, a small gap. I pried it open, and inside was a metal box wrapped in an old cloth. Inside were photographs, letters, and a locket I hadn't seen since childhood. My mother's. It had my name engraved inside. Beneath it all was a worn-out cassette tape, labeled in my father's handwriting. For Emily. I found an old player and pressed play. The tape hissed softly before his voice filled the room. Deep, calm, familiar. If you're hearing this, Em, then I suppose I'm gone. I wanted to leave you with something I couldn't say out loud. I know I wasn't a good father. At least not in the way you needed. I failed you in the simple things. Birthdays, talks, laughter. But not in love. Never in love. I loved you every second, even when I didn't know how to show it. And if there's anything after this life, I'll still be watching. Not as a ghost, not as a burden, but as a proud father who finally rests, knowing his little girl made it. His voice cracked on the last line, and I broke with it. The tape clicked off, leaving a silence that said everything. That night, I lit a candle by the window. His old habit whenever he wanted to keep the dark honest, as he used to say. I sat there for hours, the city lights blinking through the glass, and felt a peace I hadn't known since childhood. In the days that followed, I boxed up his things carefully. Not as burdens, but as memories. I gave the bureau report to Reeve, told him to destroy it. Some truths, I realized, don't need to live forever. They just need to be acknowledged once, gently, before being let go. Before leaving, I visited his grave at Arlington. The air was cool, the wind whispering through the rows of white stones. I placed the pressed daisy on his headstone and whispered, I forgive you, and thank you. For the first time, I didn't feel the weight of silence between us, only warmth. Years have passed since then. I still live in Washington, though the city feels smaller now. Kinder. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of a man in a gray coat in the crowd. Maybe a memory. Maybe something more. And I always think of that last letter. You see, love doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in quiet sacrifices, in late-night watchfulness, in letters never sent until the world is ready to hear them. My father wasn't distant. He was guarding me. From danger, from guilt, from the truth too heavy for youth to bear. And that's what I've come to learn. That silence, when born of love, isn't emptiness, it's protection. Even now, when the rain hits the windows just like that day, I still hear his voice in the echo. Calm, steady, proud. He never left me. He was just standing behind the glass, watching, keeping me safe until I could see him clearly again. And I do now.